Okay, here's a quick cloud demo. These are some resource pictures that I use. You can see there's all kinds of different kinds of clouds. And what I think we'll go for in this painting is something simple if you haven't done this before. And I'd like you to just take a look at the patterns of some of these clouds. A lot of them have sort of diagonal patterns, even though they're kind of bunchy. See, take a look at this, how at the bottom they're sort of flat, and then you've got heavier ones as well as light wispies behind that. These are really light and wispy. You do not need much paint at all, or you don't need to do much painting to create some clouds that are very nice. Okay, so these are just some other ones. We're going to do some pink ones in the next lesson when we do sunsets. This is a good one right here. Nice flat horizontal indication of clouds with a little bit more popping up there. Okay, this is our background, which is actually very dark. You will probably not be have such a dark blue as a background. In fact, it's easier if it's lighter. I just happen to have this. I'm spraying it just a little bit. Okay, my palette. Same thing we're working on this painting. We've got a tiny bit of yellow, tiny bit of burnt sienna, some white, and some blue. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to mix up a tiny bit of white. I don't want to use my white full strength until the very end when I'm really popping out my clouds. So I'm mixing some burnt sienna that's going to give me a little bit of flesh tone. Add in a tiny bit of yellow. I'm going to take a card here and test what my color is. It's a little bit yellow, see that? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so going to add, just put some color on here. I got this a little bit wet. That's okay. A little bit more. I'm going to do some horizontal lines in here. I'm painting this down flat. Laying in some more. Okay, taking a brush with nothing on it to blend in a bit. Some of these edges are hard because there is not water on the entire painting. Of course, we're going to be doing this behind some trees. Okay, so this area that I sprayed over the dry acrylic is going to dry the way that it was. So if I don't go into it, it's going to stay its darker blue color. Those are the dogs barking at some chickens. Little bit of this white left on my brush. Going to add some cirrus clouds up in here. And then I may not do anything else at all with that. So we're going to wait just a second for it to dry a little bit. Actually, I'm not going to wait for it. I'm taking my paper towel and rubbing some of it off because this has got a bit wet. You can also use the paper towel as a tool to paint with. Brushing this off to the side here. See that? Okay. These are going to be some of these puffy cumulus clouds. Okay, so mine was a little bit too wet, but it's okay if you see my mistakes. Not really mistakes, but how I deal with the paint occasionally if it's too wet or not wet enough. So really important is, sorry about that, really important is don't mess with this too much. This is looking fine, so I'm just going to leave it. Okay, note to self, put the dogs out before I try to do some recording. But I haven't done anything else to this, and I didn't want to start it over because I think it's working fine. I've got some white, solid white on here. I'm going to add a little bit of color. If you have a little bit of red, you might want to add some of that in too, so it's kind of pinky peachy, depending on what colors you're going for. But right now, this is going to be fine. What we have here is kind of almost a Naples yellowy. So if you have a Naples yellow, you can use some of that. See, so it's not perfectly white. I'm going to take a look at my reference again. See, some colors are very similar here. I'm going to paint right on that painting there. There's a lot of yellowish in these clouds. So let's just do a little bit. This is kind of wet, but not really. That's the best way I know how to describe this phase. Taking some more of this color here. I still haven't used my white full strength yet, even though it looks like it's pretty full strength. Then I'm going to take a brush with nothing on it. This paint is fairly dry. Just to fuzz those edges out. I can't stress enough throughout this entire course that taking the time to stop painting and stand back is really important. You're not going to be looking at a painting from up close when it's hanging on your wall. Here's another brush with nothing on it. Dabbing. And I'm dabbing the paint out, but I'm leaving some of it more solid, like this area right in there. I'm leaving that. Right here, same kind of thing. We're going to see light that reflects off the top of the clouds. You take a look at this again. See how the tops of the clouds are a little bit more full white. The bottom sort of fade back into the gray or the blue of the sky. Some of these clouds are going to be further back too. Some are going to be close up. Blending. You can be pretty hard on this canvas, or even if you're painting on cardboard box or paper. You don't have to be timid about painting with the brush or pressing hard. This particular brush, I'm using it in all different kinds of ways. Okay, I'm going to take still another brush with nothing on it because I want to blend this out a little bit. Nothing on the brush. That's not doing too much, but that's okay. All right, now it is what I call almost dry. So I'm going to step back and leave it. When I come back in, I'm going to punch some of these tops of clouds out with some of my full strength white. Okay, so the only other thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of my full strength white from here, just a little bit, and sort of make some of these cloud edges more full strength and harder. Not all of them, just a little bit. My full strength white. And then I'm going to take another brush with nothing on it. Maybe this one right here. Remember that a lot of times, much of the time, you can just wipe your brush off rather than dipping it back in water. Sometimes you do not want a lot of water on your brush. This is my brush with nothing on it. I'm going to do just the same thing that I did before, which is push the paint up to the edge. See, I did not use very much paint, and you can see how it's spreading out. That's why you do not want to add too much of this, because then you'll have paint that you need to lift off. Push this down a little bit. I'm going to assume that my light is coming from the same place that our light source in this painting is coming from, which is this side. See this little goof right here? I had a little bit of wetness that wasn't all the way dry, but I'm going to wait till it dries and then go back in and correct it later. It's no big deal at all, but while there's a wet spot there, the paint will keep lifting off. So much of this is just getting to know what you can do with the paint at different phases of it being dried. And the best way to do that is to just paint. Okay, and there we go. get back to your own clouds now. Yay! This is the beginning of our tree tutorial. I am putting some light colors in here. What these are is, let me show you, is white with some blue, some burnt sienna, and our yellows just mixed up so that we're working from the back front. I'm not worried that these are too bright. Also, this background is pretty dark. Your background probably won't be this dark. This is just an indication of reflection here. I haven't done any water painting. I'm just focusing on the trees right now. Okay, since I drew that in there, and I'm going to wipe my brush off here, and then I'm just going to smear these out a little bit. So these will be like distant trees, and remember you can use your paper towel as a tool, so I'm going to dab at it. Okay. Now, these are some indications of trees in water and sky. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to break up the tree line a bit. Some are higher, some are lower. I'm going to end up making some of these pine trees, evergreens, and some of them the deciduous trees. Okay, next I'm going to just add a little bit of reference for the land, and let's say here is our where the land meets the water. And again, just break it up. This is kind of like light that is casting shadows through the trees. You take a look at a clump of trees and it's going to generally be dark on the ground. Just got paint on my brush. I'm bringing it back down in here. And then on the water area, we are going to have some horizontal ripples, either horizontal or coming down here. There's a little bit of water on my brush. Okay. A little bit more. This is just burnt sienna and blue. In this case, cobalt blue, but you can really use any blue. Burnt sienna and blue is a great all-around color. Shadows. Okay. Foliage. You name it. Okay, I'm going to let this dry and then come back in and just add a touch of detail. Okay, so you might notice this looks slightly different than the last painting, but it's at the same phase because I actually did the whole tutorial and it wasn't recording. So what we got here, some basic background lay-in, some further distant trees, and what I'm going to do now is do a little bit more variation of the color. I'm using this flat brush. Same palette. White, yellow, some blue, a little burnt sienna. And I've got my cards here. I like to test colors sometimes. I think I want to make it a little bit brighter, so I'm going to add this. I haven't used any green out of the tube yet. And if you do have green out of your tube, I would encourage you to do all the lay-in this way by mixing it, and then you can go and emphasize. Okay, it's a little bit light. I want it to be a little darker. A little darker green. There we go. Okay, so darker areas. It's okay if there's different colors on the brush. It's actually nice to have some different colors on the brush. What I'm basically doing is just dabbing some paint on there. And some of it's darker, some of it's lighter. I'm going to bring some down here so we mirror in our water. I'm just working on my base coated ground, but it kind of looks like water. And I'm adding a little bit more shadow to the bottoms because these trees will cast light down, or cast shadow down into the bottom of the trees where they meet the ground. So there are darks here. Sometimes they're going to go up there. So my reference picture that I'm using for the trees is this one right here. Brush with nothing on it. Just to soften some of the edges. This brush is a little bit big, but it's actually better to use a brush that's too big than one that's too small. These look a little bit too even, so I'm going to break them up a bit. One other little trick I want to show you that we'll be doing some more of with the other rest of the reflections is when the paint is still wet, you can take a brush with nothing on it and blend it out to help with your water. I've got a little bit of paint left here. I don't want to have to add more quite yet. Okay. Flat brush on its side. Some of these trees are going to be evergreens. Some are going to be deciduous trees, lose their leaves. And right now they're kind of full because this painting is a summer painting. I'm going to do a couple more here. Okay. And then I'm going to mirror it, excuse me, mirror it down here. Mirror it down there. Sometimes I will use a ruler or a straight edge when I do this. Right now, kind of jumping around the camera here. So then let me take a brush with nothing on it. And I have one more right here. We'll try this one. Another little flat brush. And while these are still wet, you can do this, which will help create your varied reflection, especially if you kind of mess up like I did where this wasn't perfectly straight. It works now. Just brush it aside. Take some of it away. You can also do the same thing if you have some water on your brush and it's a little bit wet. You can use it kind of like watercolor. Acrylic treads between aspects of watercolor and oil. You can do a little of both techniques. Okay, then one other thing is we're going to add a few of the pine branches to this. I've got a dark green or my dark brownish, which is my blue and brown together, and a flat brush on its side. What I'm doing is I'm doing just horizontal lines right now. These evergreens. It's nice to think of trees in clumps. Rather than doing one evergreen, one evergreen, one evergreen, do a clump of them. My sky on this demo is a little bit dark, but that's okay. The contrast from this other behind it will help it read. And then you can brush out a little bit. So much of this is getting to know the brush you're using. And on these will be, we'll do some leaf clumps. I'm using the brush sort of on an angle on the very triangle or corner tip. These flat brushes are great. You can use them in any number of manner. Okay, and I'm going to cover up some of this tree trunk, but not all of it, because I want to still have the indication of the tree trunk. Clump, clump here, and the same with here. Okay, I'm going to add one more evergreen maybe, since I got some reflections going down there that I like. what I did was kind of negative, which works too, which means the paint under it was wet, so it took some paint off. I wish I was there watching all of you paint so I could see your happy accidents and I could say, oh, leave that. There's no wrong way to do this. You just need to do it. So, enjoy. I'm going to do one more thing, which is show you some close-up details of these demonstrations that I just did. So, just point out that these are both very similar, basically the same. Things I like about this is the way that this flat brush created this tree right here, and see the contrast between this and this. There's very little detail to this. It's kind of watercolory, just blocks of green, blue, yellow, and brown, and see how it's not all blended together? That's nice. And then this right here, it's when you look really carefully, you'll see how imperfect and blobby it is, but then when you put it back, you can see how it all fits in together. This is where I did some of that brush with no paint on it work there. And then this is the one I just did with you, same kind of thing. So look at the simplicity. Look at how it doesn't take much. And it certainly doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Okay. We are going to be laying in the large blocks. The brushes I'm going to be using are, the same one I used to lay in our ground, and this other little one, and I'm keeping a few other brushes handy, and I've got paper towels handy. So, we're going to paint from back to front. We're doing the sky and, well, we're kind of painting from back to front. We're going to do the sky and the water first because they're the most similar in color, and I like to think of them as more transparent. And then second, we're going to lay in the foliage. Now, our light source on this, it's going to be important to always keep the light source in mind. This I plan to be like a midday. So there is light and shadow, but the light is coming from above. It can be either from here or from here. When we do sunset, we'll have more specific elongated shadows, but mostly I want you to just get the idea of seeing light and dark in trees and seeing reflections in the water. And so let's just continue. Let's imagine our light source is like somewhere here or somewhere there. You can choose. All right. Dip the brush in water. My blue, I don't want to go too dark with it. I'm doing blue, white with a little bit of this burnt sienna. The reason I put this red in here is because it's nice to have a little red to make it a little purpley. When you do your palette, I have this written in the notes too. Use more white, a little bit more blue. You do not ever need very much of that red at all. That red is going to last you a long time. So I've also got my index cards handy. I like to sort of test color here. And I also sprayed my palette with water. So what's good about these foam plates? They're also easy to wash them off and use them again and again. All right, so we do not want the paint to be too thin either, because again, you're going to cut, kind of like in the ground, you're going to be covering it pretty much entirely. So I'm going to test here. I kind of like that. It's super light, but that's okay. A lot of times I tend to do skies really dark from the start. And sometimes that works, but other times I end up needing to add a lot more light to it if there's not enough contrast, because I like doing clouds. So I'm laying it in here, and I'm not going to worry too much about, add a little bit more of this. Some artists will tell you to mix your color ahead of time with a palette knife. Yeah, we can do that too, but I'm just going to mix it on the palette. I just want to get you guys painting so that you can learn what the paint does. Learn the different phases of drying and what you can do. See, I'm brushing over what I already drew, but that's okay. Just have fun. All right, I added a little bit of yellow in there. Y'all should know that yellow and blue make green. I've got a quick color wheel note in the handout, but I'm not going to take time explaining that because I would rather explain some of these things as we're painting rather than do a bunch of theory ahead of time. So I'm kind of liking what this is doing. You might notice that I'm making it, the lines go horizontally like this. It's because I'm going to make this cloud, there's some horizontal action in the clouds here. And there's not much else I'm going to do with this. I really like this brush right here. Inexpensive. It's about 1 inch. Slightly less. All right, so now since we got same color on the brush, we're going to go down and do the water. And just keep in mind that the water is going to be darker near the land area because it's going to be in shadow. Because the light is coming from above, those trees are going to cast shadows on the water. And so we might want to start working that in now. Making some little bit more white down below. And maybe some dark. Now also, my favorite colors are mixing brown and blues. Isn't that beautiful? So I'm going to just sort of start this dark action going here. Yeah, take in some white, mix it in, and I'm just going to lightly sort of feather that across. So that's okay, that's fine. All right, now what I'm going to do is wipe this brush off. I'm not going to dip it because we're just laying in color, and it's okay if some of this blue goes on my brush because what does blue and yellow make is green. We're going to be doing the foliage next, which is going to be here and here. Eventually we're going to be adding atmospheric perspective, which is the colors that are further away are going to be more grayed out, and these colors are going to be more vibrant and vivid, which is really evident in that research, the reference photograph. But right now we're going to do some yellow here, mix up some green. It's an interesting thing mixing greens. There's a ton of greens that you can buy commercially, but it's important not to generally use any green right out of the tube because those colors are just matched and chosen by somebody who designed those colors, not necessarily by the one who created the green in this world in the first place. And so, and also the light is the light and what's happening is going to affect what the green looks like. If the green is going to be more blue or more yellow, and also what is reflecting off of it. So all of these things to think about. And right now we're just trying to observe. And by painting, by drawing, you understand the world, the physical world more. So this is a little bit boring and greeny, I mean I should say greeny, yellowy, but I'm just going to lay it in anyways. Alright, see how I'm starting to get some action of where this foliage might be? And also, I didn't like it at first, but I'm kind of liking it more now. And see these different variations? I'm going to zoom in a little bit, because this is going to be important in painting, is that see the variations. There's some yellow, some burnt sienna, and different colors in there. That's good to leave. You don't want to overwork. I'm going to add a little bit more white now to this to make this sort of light blue-green. And these are going to be further away. I might actually, that's a little bit too white. That's okay though, because I can fix it. I've got at least, pretty much, I think I told you in the last lesson, about 5 minutes at least to work these areas. What I'm going to try to do is also try to make some light areas and some dark areas. Even while you're laying it in, it's fine. Don't overwork it. That's one of the most important lessons. All right, I'm going to now, I've got a lot of light on here. I'm just going to brush it off on the side or dab it here to get rid of this paint because I don't like wasting paint. And then I'm going to also brush it off on the side. If you have extra paint on your brush also, instead of just wiping it off, see if there's anything you can do on the side of your painting, and it'll make your finishing that much easier. All right, so I'm going to wipe it off again. Zoom back out. I am not putting the reference photograph in the split screen because I'm assuming that you've got the reference photograph on your phone or tablet, or if you've been able to print a version of it. All right, I'm going to go darker now. I want to make a darker green. I'm going to take some of that brown, which is a really reddish brown, and blue. Yeah, right here. So we don't want to go super light or super dark in this phase. That is going to be for our finishing phase. But I want to make a dark that's a little bit more. So here, these are going to be grasses. So I might as well start the motion of the grasses here. So I'm going to brush this up because what's underneath is going to help me. Now we will be going back into finishing this water, so don't get too attached to if you make the perfect grass stroke coming up right now. Well, if you do make something perfect that you want to save, we can work around it. But in general, you're just laying in the motion right here. So I like that, that's fine. I've done the whole thing with this brush. I'm going to stand back a little bit because there is time to stand back while it's still wet. That's going to be something that's really important, is constantly standing back and looking at your work. And what I see is that I want to add some more dark in here right now. I kind of like to go and add my lights in here, but this is starting to dry already, so I think I'm going to wait. The other thing, if you want to, is some of you who are more experienced, I would say when you do this, you can add some indication of clouds with your sky at this phase, which I didn't do. I'm making it pretty even there. I'm just going to do some simple clouds in this one. I'm not going to do too many puffy clouds. So this is checking this. I'm going to check this on a card. I want a little bit more of this in here. It's going to be a little bit more, a little bit too blue now, so I'm going to add some Naples yellow and a little bit of this. All right, this is just supposed to be sort of a dark blue-green to give me, it's not dark enough. Some of you guys will have black in your setups, and don't use any black yet. I don't ever use black. I'll explain that. When we're doing details, I'll explain how I get my darks. All right, this is nice. I like this. So I'm also going to do a little bit of this in here. I know we're not doing too many reflections yet, but I can at least start getting that going. So there are going to be some distant trees. There's going to be a like kind of like a field. If you take a look there, that's going to be light, and then there's going to be some bushes. So I'm about ready to go to a smaller brush, which is going to be this one. Dipping in water first, just because it's easier to clean afterwards. I can still work this a bit. See what this is? This is thin paint. Get used to seeing what the paint does when it is almost dry and when it's wet, and then, as we'll see in the next lesson, when it's dry. That's just something that you have to get used to. A lot of these things you can't learn unless you're actually experiencing the paint and what its drying times are. You can still mess with it. If you can still mess with it and you like what's happening, that's fine. There's no real fast rules. And as most any artist will tell you, rules are meant to be broken. And in this case, you are the creator of your art. I don't want to mess with that because I kind of like those tree lines of what they're doing. I'm going to take a little bit of light now. I've got time to play with this still. We are going to be coming back and doing details in the next lesson. So that's why I want to keep these lessons short. I don't want you to overwork this. I'm starting to give the indication of where this field is right now. This is probably one of the longest instructional videos, so you can stop it and start it as you go. All right, I'm going to stop the video now, and we will come back and do details next. So try to get to this phase, and if you're working with someone, look at each other's work and be aware if you're overworking. I cannot emphasize that enough. Keep it simple.